Hello, my friends. Beautiful sunny afternoon in my part of the world. Such a gorgeous afternoon. Glad that you are here, that a few of you at least are taking the time to join me. And I see someone joining me from a very wet northeast Scotland. Awesome. I'm so tickled that you're here. Feel free to be typing into the comments where you're watching from. It's always fun for me to see where in the world you're tuning in from. Let me introduce myself. I'm Susan Smith. I am a long arm machine quilter, and I'm coming live onto my YouTube channel every day for 30 days to talk about all kinds of topics related to quilting. So we're on day 14 today. And lots of you have sent in topics and questions, and that is so very helpful to know what things you're wondering about. But today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics, honestly, which is choosing thread color for a quilt that has a whole lot of colors in it. How do you find a happy medium in that sort of quilt? So you may or may not know this about me if you're newer to my channel. My favorite style of quilting is edge to edge and freehand. So freehand means I'm at the long arm and I'm driving the handlebars. It's completely controlled by me. And edge to edge means the same quilting is over the whole quilt from one edge to the other. So there's no stopping and starting for blocks or for borders or for changing thread colors or anything like that. So when I talk about choosing a thread color then that plays happily on the whole quilt, it's going to be the same thread and the same type of quilting across the whole thing. So I want a thread that blends well and looks good across all the fabrics that are in the quilt. So let's see who's chiming in. And you guys, I don't have my contacts in or my glasses on, so we'll see how good the reading goes. Texas and Oklahoma City and Finland. Awesome. Cleveland, Ohio. Someone else is having a nice sunny day. And Anne, happy Sunday. Same to you, Anne. Okay, feel free as I talk to be typing in thoughts or comments or questions about this process of thread choosing, or indeed ideas for tomorrow and later this week topics. I'm happy to try and answer those as best I can. And if you enjoy these little chats, would you please give this episode a thumbs up? Feel free to share it also with your friends. And remember to click the notification bell so that you are notified each and every time that I go live. Mostly I try and do it in the mornings for me, so between 8 and 9 a.m. Central. Clearly today I'm later. I was at church this morning and it's just how it worked out. And earlier this week I was traveling and so there were irregular days. But generally I try and do them at a similar time of day so that you know when to hunt for them. And I just get them scheduled a little bit in advance, maybe half an hour or an hour for the most part. So you kind of have to watch for them, and that little bell and notification can be very, very useful. All right, let's talk thread. So here's the quilt. I've got a whole bunch of threads here too. Here's the quilt in question. My friend Janet made this quilt, and it's a 9 patch, you can see, and it's very scrappy, and there's lots and lots of different colors in it. Yellows, golds, browns, oranges, greens. I'll show you a few more areas. Super pretty little quilt. Okay, and here is Janet's backing, this lovely golden background, giant, large-scale floral. So keep that in mind. That will factor into the decision. So with this quilt in mind, I'm going to hold up some of my thread options that I've considered, and then we'll see if you and I come to the same decision. And I'll start by saying, I've heard a lot of machine quilters say in the past that when they're choosing a thread for a multicolored quilt, they will tend to go with the lightest color that's represented in the quilt and use that one. That's not my personal favorite, and you know, this is a matter of opinion, I'll be honest about that, but my personal opinion is if I pick a thread that matches something very light in the quilt, then where that light fabric is, my stitching is going to show very little. It will almost disappear. And everywhere that it's much darker, my quilting will show up a lot because there's a lot of contrast. To my eye, that looks like it's stopping and starting, and I don't like that look. So my tendency right off the bat is to go more middle of the road with my thread. So I'll pick kind of a middle color in the quilt, and sometimes I'll pick a mid-range color that's not even in the quilt, but something in that mid-range that will blend with all the things that are darker and equally well blend with all the things that are lighter and show up similarly across all the fabrics. That's my goal. With a quilt that has as many colors represented as this one, you know, it's not going to be a perfect science. I'm just going to pick something that I think looks pleasing against the quilt, but it's not going to be the palest one. Let's see if I can find a pale fabric. Like here's one that's a very pale, it's white and a yellow gingham. I'm definitely not going to pick white nor even cream because there's such a high concentration of darker fabrics. And I think that that would be far too pale. So here's some of the choices I looked at. One is this mid-range brown, which is definitely on the darker end. And another would be this deep wine color. There is a fair bit of that in the quilt, but again, same thing. I think that's too close to that dark, rich end of the fabrics. More promising is this khaki green. I don't know that there is any exactly khaki of this color. There's a similar one. But, you know, again, it fits the criteria of being lighter than the darks and darker than the lights, and therefore would play well, I feel like, across all the fabrics. Another choice would be this kind of caramel color. It's a little darker, honestly, than it looks on camera. So it's definitely not as pale as the palest colors in here, but toward the lighter tones. But here's the one that I have finally settled on. Let me give you a different piece of the quilt to look at, is this rich gold. There is a bit of this in the quilt, but the reason I kind of settled on this finally was this. Look at my backing against it and see how pleasing that is. So I feel like the other thread choice that I liked well on the front of the quilt was the khaki green, but the khaki green is a really sharp contrast on the backing, and I don't think that'll be super pretty on the back of the quilt. And I want the back to be pretty too. So all other things being equal, I'm going to pick the one that looks good with the backing. So let me give you a look of the khaki on that. See, that's just not a great feel, I feel like. The gold is much better. And lastly, and I can't do it very easily on camera, so I'll just tell you it. But when I am trying out or sort of auditioning a thread color, I will usually take some yards of it, like 2 or 3 yards, and spool it out and lay that puddle on the quilt. There is definitely a difference between looking at this whole spool and looking at a strand across the quilt, or even several strands, because they're going to be close to each other when it's quilted. Definitely a different feel. So that's a good way to get a better representation of what that thread is going to look like on that fabric. And then also you can take the same little pile of thread and move it around on your quilt. How does it look on the green? How does it look on the brown? How does it look on the creamy areas? And that gives you a really good representation of what it will look like when it's quilted. Okay, let's see what the comments are. Let's see if these old eyes can read them. Not really. Okay, you guys, I'll have to come back and read your comments later. It's hysterical. I was just getting home before I came live, and I just didn't think to go and grab my glasses and put them on my head, and I'm just looking around. Yeah, there's no spare pairs in my sewing room either. I'm just out of luck. But I do see one person. Thanks, Susan. I've learned so much from you. What number is that? Like, what number is the quilting thread? That I do not think I'll be able to read. I can't. It's so tiny. It is an Isacord 100% poly. It's lighter than a copper, deeper than a gold. That's all I can tell you. Okay, let's see if there's a few more comments that I can make out. Love the gold orange color. Great. Calling for snow in Timmins, Ontario, someone is saying. Oi, that sounds way too much like winter already. Oh, look, look. Mr. Producer just reached in the door and gave me a pair of glasses. Hang on, let me clean the dust off them, okay? And then I'll put them on and then we can talk better. Okay, let's see. Okay, gold thread. It is Isacord, is the brand. And the color is 0824. It's a 40 weight thread. Okay, now I can read some comments better. Oh my goodness, so much better. Let me scroll back just a little bit. All the hellos, which is lovely. Thank you all for chiming in. It just makes my day. I'm enjoying your videos. Nadia in Bernina land in Switzerland. I love it. I love it. I love it. That's where Berninas are made, in case you didn't know. Ruth in Eastern Kentucky. Gretchen, Mary, step-by-step quilting in Heidelberg, Germany. Awesome. Daisy, under the weather today. I'm sorry. Jana Bowman, hi. Linda, just joining. Helping unpack a camper. Oh my goodness. She loves the shade of mocha, a medium to light brown. Actually, I do too, and that was certainly a possibility for this quilt. But again, as I showed you, it narrowed down based on the backing of the quilt, because I could have gone any of several ways. There's so many colors in the quilt, right? You could go any number of ways. Okay, great choice, Mary's saying. Linda loves the gold orange color. Good, I'm glad I converted you, Linda. Carol, what number's that? And I told you that. Peggy, great idea to puddle the thread. I usually lay a long piece across. Yes, and I started doing that too, just laying the one single piece, because your stitching is just one single row of thread. But of course, there's multiple rows of stitching next to each other. So for me, I think it's a little more realistic to make a bit of a puddle with a few crisscrossing threads, and that gives me a better picture of what it's going to look like. Daisy loves that quilt behind me, so do I. It's a Krista Moser pattern. Carol, mine was goldenrod. The isocords don't have a name that I know of. They just have a 4-digit number. And hers was 800, so close. Anne, buy Mr. Producer a cup of coffee. I'll make him one, Anne, is what I'll do. And okay, Linda, enjoy stitching while you share. And Vanilla Yogurt is asking, do you change your bobbin color if you change your top thread color? That's a great question, actually. My first choice is to stitch with the same thread, top and bottom, the same thread color, but I don't always. But I do always stitch with similar ones. So in other words, I don't put a red in the bottom and a cream on the top, or vice versa, or what's something else that would be drastic, like a purple and a yellow, that would be very, very different, or a dark purple and a pale lemon yellow, for example. But if I wanted to do, say, this shade of green on the top and this brown in the bottom, I probably could get away with it because they're similar in intensity and in shading. So what happens when you have two very, very different threads, top and bottom, is that even if your tension is perfect, a certain amount of those threads show through the needle holes. And if your tension is even ever so slightly off perfect, it can show quite badly. And so then you end up maybe with white areas on the top of your quilt with a red bobbin thread showing, and it's so, so visible to your eye. But this quilt that I'm working on now, for one thing, is very, very busy. You're not likely to see that. And you can imagine if I had these two threads, top and bottom, the green is not going to show violently against the brown or vice versa. So that would be certainly an option. If I wanted to, quilt with the golden thread on the bottom and put something different on the top, I could, but I would look for them to be similar in intensity and in color, if that makes sense. Donna, I also use isocord, but would like to know how long can it be stored? I don't know an answer to that, Donna, but being that it's polyester, I don't think it's got a short shelf life. I think it's half of forever, probably. There may be differences if, for example, it is stored in strong sunlight for several years. That could really affect its strength, I think. But if it's stored in any kind of drawers, or mine's just on a wall where the sun doesn't hit it and I use it fairly continuously, years, I'm sure years. I know my mother made quilts with, she would buy threads out of the sale bins at the cheapest department stores. And she made quilts like that 50 years ago, and I still have some of those quilts. Are they showing signs of wear? Absolutely they are, but they've also been used and washed for 50 years. So I just feel like, I don't know. I don't ever think about my thread wearing out. I don't think it's likely with 100% polyester thread. It's going to outlast me for sure. Okay, Daisy, watching you on YouTube only. Something wide on TV. I'm not following. I'm sorry, Daisy. I'm not following what you're asking or saying there. But anyway, that's my little treatise on thread choices. So, whoops, dropped the one spool. This quilt is one of the things in the queue for this week. So maybe one morning when I'm quilting it, that'll be, I'll show you it, and that can be the subject of one of our live discussions, and maybe what design I choose to quilt on it. I'm not sure what that'll be yet, but it will certainly be something edge to edge that's just quilted across the whole thing, lending texture and beauty and quiltiness to the project, but not custom quilting. So that's it for today. Again, you guys, I'm live every day for 30 days. This is day 14. Every day is a different topic, but just surrounding machine quilting. And this week, for example, I know that I'm going to be talking about how I store my batting and how I measure it and cut it, because I do have the big rolls and they can be unwieldy to work with. So I'll show you my nifty storage system for that. It's DIY. You can do it too if you want to. I'm planning on doing a small trunk show for, there are generations of quilters behind me. So I have quilts in my home that my mom, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother made. And so I'm gonna do a little mini trunk show that kind of weave my story in a little bit with that. So, and if you have ideas for things you'd like to hear about or questions you'd like to ask, feel free to email me, info@stitchedbysusan.com. I would appreciate that. And that looks like it's it for today. Vanilla Yogurt is starting to ask something, should thread, and then an oops. So I'll wait for a second and see if that question comes up. Once again, if you're enjoying these little episodes, would you please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this with any of your friends that you think would appreciate these daily chats as well. I would appreciate that. Quiltsy Linda, wonderful, needs some batting storage tips, good. And I'm not seeing that other question come through. So we're gonna call it for today, and I'm gonna go off to what is lunchtime for me. Whatever you're doing today, I hope you enjoy it thoroughly, and I will chat with you again tomorrow.